I don't have time to think of a clever intro. Birdie's just the worst. Go to the review. What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Anderson here, and this is What If Season 3, Episode 5, What If the Emergence Destroyed the Earth? So this one was actually a pretty solid idea, and fairly solidly executed as well. The problem is, the main character at the focus of all of this, I don't give a crap about. Not only because Riri Williams has not really been focused on much to this point, but also hearing a lot about how bad Ironheart is, I'm really not interested in her character right now. So making her the focal point, making her the one that is the one that's got to stand up and fight, the one that's going to make the Watcher break his oath again and interfere when he shouldn't be, you got to pick a character that's a lot stronger and going to make the audience connect more. And honestly, there's just not much about her that does. Like, I think if you're going to do this with a character like her, you need to give us more than what we've seen from her so far in the MCU. You had to build her up a bit more. Maybe do this episode after, well, obviously her show does not seem to have done well, but if her show did do well, and if her character was really good after that show, then maybe we focus on her for an episode like this and make her the one that fights back and gives everybody hope and all of this stuff. But as it is, she's not the right character for this. I don't know who is in the MCU right now, to be perfectly honest, but outside of the fact that she's good with electronics, so that's why she can counteract everything that Quentin does. Outside of that, there's no real reason why she should be the focal point. But I will say two things that do work in this episode that made it slightly more enjoyable than what the rest of the season has been. First of all, Alejandro Saab, I don't know if that's how you say his last name or not, but getting an actual voice actor in this just adds so much. I know him from Persona 3 as well as Eternites, and he's also done a lot of additional voices in games as well. But he's a really good voice actor, and so he comes in to be Quentin Beck in this one, and it's very apparent. You got all of these actors that are trying to do voice acting in these shows, trying to play their characters in these shows, and it just doesn't work. Because there's a difference between acting and voice acting, and you do have to approach it differently, and not every actor is capable of it. And I think it's been shown in this show from season 1, some of the actors are able to do it, they do okay with it, and then some of them really struggle, and they come off as flat, they come off as boring. But getting somebody who is a voice actor to come in and voice Quentin Beck in this one, he did a really good job. And it actually made me a lot more invested in this episode because of that. But also, I do think that story before the Watcher intervenes, I think it's kind of an interesting one. It's one that's a lot darker. It's one where I do think having her make some mistakes and end up losing the battle, I do think it works. Again, I don't think the character is strong enough to make me care and make me want the Watcher to step in and intervene. But I do like the idea that, yeah, in this world, things are kind of doomed. Beck's plan is a very intricate one, and it shows just how devious he can be if given the right tools. Because that scene whenever he shows her all of the members of the Alliance that are now dead, like, that scene works really well. Not just with his voice acting, but also the setup of it, showing her losing all of her will to fight. Like, that scene, out of context, just looking at how it was all set up, I think it was very well done. But unfortunately, in context and what the episode was as a whole, it just didn't really grip me as much as it should. But now I think we are starting to get into, I guess, the end game of this show, where now we've got these other, I guess they're not Watchers, because in the subtitles they were called like the Executioner and I don't remember now. But we see these other beings that are similar to the Watcher that I guess are not happy with him. So I'm guessing he's going to have to fight for the right to step in and change some of these foregone conclusions. Which, I mean, there is something there about changing fate and denying destiny and all of that stuff, which has been done several times before. But yeah, we'll see what they decide to do with it. I'm not really looking forward to it, but it's more interesting than what we got in the first half of the season. So I guess it's a step up. The problem is when you're in the basement and you're trying to make your way up of several flights of stairs, a few steps up doesn't really mean much. But with all that being said, we move on to the 6th episode. I'll see you there. And now episode 6, What If 1872? So first of all, the fact that the Watcher starts off with this one saying that some of these universes are less what if and more what the hell is ironic, because I actually had the same thing. I ended up not going with that joke, but I had the same thought whenever we watched the whole Howard the Duck one. I'm like, this is not what if, this is what the hell. It's really weird that a joke that I came up with in a couple of seconds while watching a different episode suddenly makes it into a different one that is really not that weird compared to Howard the Duck and Darcy have a kid that becomes magical and all these beings want it. How is that not the one that gets the what the hell joke? But anyways, looking at this one, I mean, it's fine, I guess. It's one that, similar to last season whenever we had all the Avengers set in like a medieval times type of situation, that's what this feels like. Let's do a cowboy episode. And so we'll have Shang-Chi and Hawkeye, but not Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye. We're going to do Haley Steinfeld's Hawkeye. But the two of them are now in the Old West, and they're trying to stop the Hood, who we don't ever find out who the original Hood was. Shang-Chi's sister just takes over for him at some point. But she's kidnapping all of these immigrants so that they can form an army and take over the country, and that's the whole premise of the episode, is Shang-Chi and Hawkeye trying to stop her from doing that. It's also a little side plot with Sonny Burch having apparently killed Kate's parents, and honestly, that scene, the only thing I could think while I'm watching it is, and what does Sonny Burch do? He starts monologuing. Starts talking about how much he loved to kill my parents and how excited he is to kill me now. It's so egregious. I understand we have to find out that he killed Kate's parents, but it doesn't have to be so expository. It really doesn't. But once again, the Watcher intervenes for this one, saves the kid, who ends up saving Shang-Chi and Kate by ringing the bell and breaking the hypnosis on all the workers, as well as, I guess, the 10 rings of the bell actually give Shang-Chi more power, I guess. I don't really know for sure. But for this one, we don't really get any explanations as to why the Watcher intervened. With Riri, we at least understood he'd watched this happen so many times. Throughout the entire episode, he was talking about how she always met the same end, blah, blah, blah. So you could really feel there was a build-up to he's going to make it to where that's not going to happen this time. For this one, it just, apparently the kid was supposed to die from those two guys that caught him on top of the train, and then the Watcher saved him. And so the kid goes and saves Shang-Chi and Kate. So I don't really get that one. I don't understand his reasoning there, but he ends up getting captured, and that's, I'm guessing, what the final 2 episodes are going to be about. I mean, if this season had been better, I might be a bit more excited for this, but to be honest, I'm not, because nothing about the season has been really that enjoyable so far. So this whole climactic cliffhanger that they've left off on here, don't really feel it. With all that being said, though, on to episode 7. I will see you guys there. And now episode 7, What If the Watcher Disappeared? So this could be a better idea if we had a better team to follow. If the setup for this season had been a bit more than just we see him interfere a couple of times in some stories that don't feel like they really matter, and then suddenly he's being punished for that. If we had maybe gotten to see this team that he'd put together that's been interfering, that could have been interesting. But no, instead it's just he interferes in 2 episodes, and then all of a sudden he gets taken in, and now all of a sudden we see this team that's apparently been going around helping all these other universes behind the scenes, I suppose. And that's just not a good setup for it, unfortunately. As well as the team itself, not great. And first of all, it's all women because, as we know in the MCU, girls rule and boys drool. But also, you have the awesomeness that is Captain Carter. You have the pretty cool character that is Kaori. You have the awesome fact that they got Storm, and not just the character of Storm, but they got the voice actors from the X-Men animated show to come back and voice her. That's pretty cool. But it's all weighed down by the fact you've got Birdie on the team. First of all, why do you have to remind me that the Howard the Duck episode even happened to begin with? But also their kid is now just grown up and a part of the team and super powerful and totally rad. Why? Why is she here? She's not funny. She's not entertaining. And again, she reminds me that Howard the Duck and Darcy are a thing canonically in this season. I don't want to be reminded of that. It's like this team in concept could work, but Birdie just drags it down so much that I'm just not interested in him. But on top of that, this is also a very short episode. I feel like the stuff with Infinity Ultron was sort of just rushed through as far as coming up with ideas. And even his reasoning for why he's willing to help now, I think we could have maybe gotten a little bit more of that. Because it's an interesting concept that he had this whole idea of how to create peace. But in doing so, it made him realize that while having nobody else is peaceful, it's also very lonely and it's no way to actually live. So I can understand what they're trying to do with this, trying to flip him, but it all happens too quickly because we have to rush through this episode to get to the season finale. I know we already saw Infinity Ultron in the first season, so to redo his story wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but I do feel like if you had given us a bit more of his story, not these little clips watching him destroy everybody, actually getting to see some of the stuff that brought him to this place, I think that would have impacted us a little bit more. So I just don't think this was very well set up for the finale, and I'm not really all that interested going into it, and I should be, because on the face of it, this sounds like an interesting idea to do, where the Watcher is interfering, he has a team that's interfering, and so he and the team are going to be punished by these other cosmic beings. I don't even know what to call them exactly. But that sounds interesting on the face of it, but how they presented it, it's not that interesting. And having to sit through this whole finale whenever we're going to get probably a good amount of Birdie in it, definitely not excited for that. But with all that being said, we are on to the finale, almost done with this, and then we'll move on, never talk about the show ever again. I'll see you guys at the finale in just a second. And finally, episode 8, What If? What If? Oh, clever. It doesn't even make any sense. But no, this episode was just boring, to be perfectly honest. Like, you've got Infinity Ultron showing up to save, we find out later his name is Uatu, saves Uatu and Peggy, gets them out of there, and after a few minutes of struggling to stay away from the other Watchers, they get pinned down. Uatu gives them all the ability of the Watchers by having them take the oath. I don't know how he's capable of doing that, but whatever. Turns into a big fight that takes way too long and is really, really boring, because it's just a bunch of, sometimes the bad guys get the upper hand, sometimes the good guys get the upper hand, sometimes the bad guys get the upper hand, sometimes the good guys, and that's it. It's just repetition, until eventually they finally get to a point where the good guys have technically won. They're trying to get the bad guys to yield because they don't want to kill them, and then finally Uatu is like, please, just yield, and basically the Eminence is like, no. And what's funny is you get to that point and he's talking about all of these versions of all these characters being removed from all of history. And there's a part of me that's like, you know, for a couple of them, and for Birdie, it would be great if she was just gone entirely. I don't even want to think about her character, but for Storm, that accent in the first live action movie was pretty bad from Halle Berry, wasn't it? Plus the wig too. I'm sure she wouldn't mind if that version of her got erased. But then Peggy sacrifices herself because she and Steve are basically the same person, just in different forms apparently. And then this day is saved because they're in Strange's universe and he keeps them from having powers. Woo! That's it. That's the whole episode. It should not have taken as long as it did, but that fight scene dragged for so long. I think the other problem is all of this is just made up. So the fact that Uatu is just able to give them Watcher powers by having them take the oath, is that allowed? The fact that Peggy is able to somehow stand up to this whatever they're doing, the three of them combining and erasing all the history, like how is that even a thing? He just says there's some things I never taught you and starts to do this move. Like where does this come from? And how is Peggy able to reverse it and then jump at them and then take them into Strange's universe? How does that make sense? Because a lot of this stuff is just happening, and we don't know enough about the Watchers at this point to know if this makes sense or not. So I feel like the ironic thing is a lot of this I'm just sort of watching. I'm not really experiencing because they've not done a good job of building this story up to the point where I'm actually invested. But I think that is ultimately the ironic message that I'm taking from all of this, is what Uatu is saying to the Eminence at the end of all of this, talking about not just watching but actually seeing and experiencing. I feel like that's a critique you can make of this show, is they do such a poor job of drawing the audience in with these stories that I do feel like I'm just watching for most of them. I don't feel like I'm truly experiencing these stories anymore, at least for this season, because there's nothing about them that gets me invested. The characters are bland. The acting is not really that good. The animation was never really the strong suit. To be honest, it feels like they've each season gotten worse and worse at making the characters look like their real life counterparts. So the story has to be so good that I really want to see more, and I really want to see what happens with these characters. And they didn't do that at all this season. None of these stories really pulled me into the world. So they failed on basically every account. And it's no surprise that this is the worst reviewed season, because a lot of this is the worst stuff that I've seen in this show. Season 1 was pretty entertaining, asked some clever ideas, not all perfect. There were a couple that were very far below the others. But on the whole of it, they had some fun ideas, and I think the way it all tied together at the end, it made sense. But Season 2, it felt like the stories became a lot less interesting, and then the way it all connected at the end felt pretty bland. And then this season, most of the stories were just trash. I was not really invested in any of them. And now it all comes together at the end, really only in the second half of the season. Outside of Birdie being mentioned in the first half, which again, I don't even want to think about that episode anymore. There's not really much about these final 2 episodes that comes from the first half of the season. First half was almost its own thing, and then episode 5 starts the idea of the Watcher interfering and the other Watchers basically wanting to stop him, which builds up to the finale. So all in all, very disappointing, bland season, and that's why I only did 2 videos on it, because I just kind of wanted to move on quickly and get on to other stuff. Granted, the next thing I'm doing for Marvel is not necessarily going to be a good thing either, from what I understand from the reviews. So with all that being said, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts in these final 4 episodes and Season 3 as a whole? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Marvel reviews, because I'm assuming we're not getting any more What If, because this season bombed so hard. Also, check out the channel. We have a lot of other reviews on here, so check those out if you have time. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you all later. Peace out.